Welcome back to our final session in the book of Ruth. It's a short book, isn't it? A tragic start, but a disproportionately happy end. That is the book of Ruth in a nutshell. Naomi and Ruth established in a safe, a loving community, providing hope for them. And not just for them, but for all of God's people. The point of the book, as we said last time, God's at work through the ups and downs to bring his purposes. And the brilliance of this book is that the grand purposes of God can be observed, enjoyed, appreciated through a love story. Whilst, of course, we may get distracted with the love story that's going on the pages between Ruth and Boaz, the story all the time is actually pointing to the love story that God has for his people. And the particular way that we see the love played out here is through a very technical word, the word redemption. In the second half of the book, chapter 3 and 4, the word redemption or redeem, it comes up no fewer than 19 times, a huge repeated idea. Ruth is a book, in the end, all about God redeeming his people. And so I think if you finish the book of Ruth, if you don't have this idea of redemption sort of ringing in your ears, then something has probably gone wrong. What does it mean? What does redemption mean? Well, part of the problem with a technical word like redemption is we don't really use the word in commonplace today. Sometimes people say, oh, well, it's the language of the city, the exchange, and that is true. But even so, people in the city don't really use that word very often. At least I haven't come across it. Redemption very simply means to buy back. Wrapped up in the idea of redemption is reestablishing or restoring something to its right state. Let me try and illustrate this. When I first heard this illustration, I understood redemption in a new way. I hope it makes sense to you too. A little boy, he decided to build a toy sailboat, and he carved out the wood carefully, and he fixed on this little boat a mast and an appropriate size sail. He painted it all red and blue and took it down to the lake. He pushed it out into the lake, hoping that the wind would catch it. And sure enough, the wind caught the sail and blew it out into the lake. Now, it didn't take long for the wind to, of course, blow it out into deep water and well out of reach. The boy hadn't considered quite the implications. Some months later, the boy was walking around downtown and walked past a second-hand shop and saw his boat, the exact same boat that he had lost on its first voyage all those months ago. And when he'd worked out that it was unmistakably his, he went into the shop and said to the shopkeeper, "That's my boat." And the shopkeeper said, "I'm sorry, little chap, but that boat belongs to me now. If you want it, you'll have to buy it back." The little boy dug deep into his pockets and paid the price for the boat. And in that sense, he bought it back. He redeemed it. And as the little boy left the shop, he apparently said under his breath, "You're my boat. You're twice my boat. First, you're my boat because I made you. And secondly, you're my boat because I bought you." That's what redemption is, to buy something back, to restore it to its rightful state through the payment of a price. Now, in the text, this redemption, well, it's worked out in lots of different ways. Firstly, we see the redemption of Ruth. She is put back in her rightful place as a member of humanity. I mean, Naomi is there. She's trying to matchmake. She has some incredible tricks up her sleeve. And Ruth does everything that Naomi suggests that she should do. She washes, she puts on fresh clothes, and she goes to meet Boaz down at the farm after his day's work. And they were meeting in a public place, and so I don't think we need to read anything sort of untowards through this rather strange encounter on the threshing floor. Nothing sexual happened. Boaz is, after all, a righteous man. And he doesn't seem to interpret Ruth's actions as inappropriate or out of place. Have a look at chapter 3, verse 10. He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Now, Boaz has already, back in chapter 2, been described as a worthy man, so they would seem well suited. And it's looking at this stage like it might be one of the shortest engagements ever until verse 12. 3 verse 12, and now it's true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Disappointing, unknown to Ruth. Boaz explains that there's another man higher up the batting order who gets first chance. Now, brief aside, in the Old Testament, if a man died without children, then it was the job of a close relative of that man, sometimes called a kinsman. He would be responsible for marrying the widow to carry on the family name, preserve the inheritance. No doubt, when Boaz saw this young woman, the impression we get is his heart was pounding. But he's a worthy man, and there were customs to be followed and laws to be kept. And he explained that to Ruth. And we're left in suspense. We don't know what's going to happen. I was actually reading this book with a non-Christian. It was my cousin, actually. He works quite close to here. Some of you have met him before. And we were going through this book. He's been interested in Christian things for some time. He'd never read the book of Ruth. And we got up to this point, and he really, really wanted to know the end. He said, well, what happens next? Does it work out? I mean, we know the end. We know where it goes. But it's a wonderful sort of story, isn't it? We're really kept in suspense at this point. And we're meant to read on. And Boaz again goes over the top in terms of his generosity. He gives Ruth a huge sort of rucksack full of grain to take home. And Ruth returns to Naomi. 3 verse 16. Ruth and Naomi debrief. I love the question, how did you fare, my daughter? How did you get on? Did all those little tricks work? The fresh clothes, did he like that? The perfume? What about that little trick with the corner of his bed? Did you do that? Well, says Ruth, the good news is he likes me enough to give me this huge sack of grain. That should keep us going. The bad news is there's another man who, under your rather antiquated marriage laws, gets first chance at me. What's going on there? Naomi is not put out. Look at 3 verse 18. Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today, and we don't have to wait long. 4 verse 1. Boaz gets straight up to the gate, he sits down, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. It's just a reminder to us as readers, just in case we'd sort of lost sight of the fact that God has got all of this in his sights. We know that these things don't happen by chance. And so as readers, we're being reminded, don't worry, God's got this. The business begins. And the exchanges that follow are brilliant, and I love all the stuff with the sandal and all of that sort of stuff. It makes for good story keeping, old customs, everything brought in line, and keeps us in suspense till the end. Have a look at 4 verse 9. Then Boaz said to the elders and to the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. A moment ago, huge uncertainty, and now jubilation, celebration. Boaz gets Ruth. The Moabite becomes the Israelites' wife. And that's hugely significant. We read back in Deuteronomy. We read back there, no Ammonite or Moabite may ever enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever. And here's Ruth, the Moabite, embraced by Boaz, one of God's people, his partner, his equal. The Lord has redeemed even the Moabite. Back to the tapestry illustration. I mean, we need to keep an eye on what God is doing, eyeing the grand tapestry as we read Ruth from his perspective, watching the way that he builds each separate stitch towards his grand picture. That's our privilege as we read the book of Ruth. I think as we do that, the more we can see God at work through all of these lives. We see, of course, a wonderful picture, not just of romance, but of redemption. And to be clear, Ruth in her relationship with Boaz functions as a picture of God's redemptive purposes. We followed Ruth, haven't we? I mean, what a turnaround for her, the tragedy, the heartache, the setback, the uncertainty. Where is she now? I mean, just think about that reversal, that buying back. The widow finds a husband. The vulnerable young lady finds physical protection, financial security. The foreigner from Moab is formally married into the assembly of God, into Boaz, his family himself. Bought back, safe, restored. Ruth is redeemed. But we also see God's redemptive work in Naomi. Have a look at 4 verse 14. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel." I wonder if you notice who redeemed Naomi. This came as a huge surprise to me the first time I read it. It could be Boaz, but actually as we read on, we realize it's not. Have a look at verse 15. "He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap. So do you see, Naomi is being redeemed here, not by Boaz, but by Boaz's son, Obed. In chapter 1, Naomi lost everything. She lost her 2 sons. Chapter 2 and 3, there was ups and downs, uncertainty, unknowns. And now at the end, she cradles in her lap. We get a glimpse again of her complete reversal. Obed, verse 15, "shall be to you a restorer of life, a nourisher of your old age." And so something very significant happens here. A principle is established. The status of redeemer passes from one to another. Boaz redeemed Ruth. Obed redeems Naomi. And that's where the story stops. Except that it carries on for us as readers. The story stops then just being a picture of what God can do and explains what God has done. Which brings us to the next point, redemption for God's people. You see, God uses 2 widows to bring about the redemption of his people, Israel. We don't know when exactly Ruth was written, but Ruth must have been in circulation. The book of Ruth must have been in circulation during the time of David or after. We know that, of course, from the end, from the genealogy. And readers need only follow the line of the redeemers from Boaz to Obed and then onwards to David. Every Israelite would have known unmistakably that God redeemed his people through David. David brought about one of the greatest sort of reversals and restorations of God's people that had ever happened in the Old Testament. David was a total hero. Think about the way that the story started in the days of the judges. There was no king, and everyone did whatever they wanted. There was trouble within the nation of Israel, and there was trouble without. Everyone around Israel hated them. They had no friends anywhere. David changed all of that. He unmistakably restored Israel to a state of relative safety. He brought security. He brought hope. He established the line of kings. And he is still held up in the Old Testament as the person that God points to if you want to see his redemptive purposes. And so now we as readers, 3,000 years after this book was first in circulation, can learn directly from what God does for his people. He redeems his people. And he redeems his people through the king. Look at the genealogy. Genealogies are so easy to skip over because they get a little bit tedious, don't they? But just bear with this one for a moment. Just listen. Don't worry too much if you don't want to follow or if you don't have. I'm going to turn to Matthew in a moment. Don't worry if you haven't got it open. Just listen to the names as they're written in Ruth. These are the generations from Perez. This is Ruth 4, verse 18. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Abinadab. Abinadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. As the New Testament opens in Matthew's Gospel, we get another genealogy, but listen to how similar it is to that genealogy, written, 1,000 years later. Matthew begins the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it goes back to Abraham. I'll pick up in middle of verse 3. Perez, the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Abinadab, Abinadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, she gets a mention, Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, she gets a mention, Obed the father of Jesse, Jesse the father of David the king. Almost exactly the same, with a few little additions there. The ladies are included as the genealogy of Jesus is spelt out, because, of course, as you carry on reading that genealogy in Matthew's gospel, as you go on to verse 16, you get, of course, Jesus, God's king. In Ruth's day, God's people experienced a redemption to a degree through David. God's people today are redeemed through King Jesus. As we know all too well, all humanity then and now shares a common trait. We get ourselves into trouble. That little boat lost at sea is a good picture of the independence and the hopelessness that we always find ourselves in. We trespass into areas that God has told us not to, and we find ourselves, every one of us, in deep water. How does Jesus bring his people back? How does God redeem us? Well, we need to see that trespassing where God has told us not to is a very serious thing, and it has incredibly serious consequences. But God dug deep into his pockets to buy us back. Not money or gold, but something much more precious. Again, Tom led on this as we started our session just now. In him, in Jesus, this is Ephesians chapter 1, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the riches of his grace. Jesus, the descendant of David, the descendant of Ruth, therefore. Have you ever thought about that? That means that Jesus has Moabite blood running through his veins. That's an interesting little detail, isn't it? God's king, God's redeemer, paid the price for me, for his people. Well, back to Ruth as we conclude. Two conclusions for us before we go back into discussions. One on the redemptive work and one on the king who achieves it. I'm going to frame each conclusion as a question, something just to sort of ponder. First question, do you value redemption? Have a look at 4 verse 16 one last time. Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." Here it is. This is the grand finale, if you like. All the women of the neighborhood, you imagine she's called in all her friends, they're all gathered round to sort of ogle at this new baby. It's meant to be a picture of the happy ever after. Security and safety and joy, especially when you contrast this with her bitter start. You remember Naomi's beginning. Now bought back, restored, complete, whole and safe. Our experience now as God's people will mesh with the ups and downs of the book of Ruth. There will be good times, there will be bad times, and we will go through them all. But our status as God's people now and for eternity, if we're a Christian here today, is one of redeemed. And that means all of the joy of this final scene is something that we can share today. We have it all now, spiritually. We have some of it now physically, as the last session laid out. And we will have it all physically too in heaven. And so that's the first question in conclusion. Do we value in our life today the redemption that has been won for you? And finally, do we value the king who achieved that redemption? It's interesting, isn't it, as the book closes, that Naomi takes center stage. In the end, Ruth doesn't get a mention even in these last few verses. Although it is already alluded to, of course, the focus is not actually on Naomi at all. It's actually on Naomi's grandson sitting in his lap, Obed. He achieves her redemption. And so as readers, we are, of course, drawn to that lineage again, to David, to Jesus. Because it's in Jesus, and Jesus alone, that our redemption was possible. We are owned twice. We're owned once because Jesus made us. We're owned twice because Jesus bought us back from our sin. Do we value our King, the Lord Jesus, who's achieved that for us?